folks. Welcome back to the fireless fireside chat. I didn't light it today because it's actually very warm for November the 5th. But welcome to today's homage to Paine, Thomas Paine. Why do I call this channel Philosophy for Philistines and Politics for Plebeians? It is my own self-styled homage to Thomas Paine, whose ideas are all the more valid 250 years after they first entered public discourse. Paine wrote on the nature of peace, order, and good government. He was a philosopher for the common man, and since I am about as common as a church mouse, it behooves me to speak and write in plain language about the necessity of honest and transparent government, something which is lamentably lacking today on both sides of the aisle, as our political class and bureaucracy come under greater influence from globalist forces eroding away at our national sovereignty and economic well-being. This is the reason for my most frequent assertion on this channel, namely that there cannot be a political solution to a moral, philosophical, and spiritual crisis. Thomas Paine was a plain-talking, big-thinking common man, self-educated in matters of science, philosophy, activism, and political theory. His pamphlets and books inspired ordinary people throughout the colonies of America to stand up for their rights and throw off the yoke of British domination. Soon after, these books were smuggled into France, where they inspired the Third Estate to agitate for the guarantee of their natural rights. Eventually, this grassroots activism would lead to the overthrow of the French monarchy and the French Revolution, where Paine would be granted honorary citizenship, a seat in its parliament, and a voice in the drafting of the French Republic's constitution. He would eventually go on to write on many issues of social justice, including abolition, universal suffrage, aged care, education, welfare, health care, and anti-corruption in government. This occasionally made him a target of powerful people, and despite his heroic status, he was eventually marginalized and forgotten, overshadowed by the major players who used his tireless campaigning to their advantage. Paine died in obscurity and poverty, having transformed the landscape of democracy across 3 continents, and was the source of many of our greatest achievements in civil discourse and progress over the last 250 years. And since I lack Paine's extreme wit and vast philosophical influence in my own small way, at least I must attempt to make others think about our most invaluable heritage, that of liberty under law. But what has happened to our liberty, and why have those who have the gall to call themselves liberal so betrayed the heritage of their own party, which was founded on Paine's liberal principles? The LPC government not only cannot stop lying, but is consistently creating new lies which contradict the previous lies its members of parliament told us in their official capacity as our elected public servants. Moreover, when we notice and speak out about their damnable lies, they label us conspiracy theorists and hate mongers. This government has become so pathologically corrupt and out of control that it is my opinion only an act of divine providence and mercy could possibly deliver this nation from their wicked perversion of good governance. They answer to no man. They act as though they're above the law. The courts can no longer hold them accountable. They refuse to answer questions directed to them by the opposition. And by doing so, they've made an utter mockery of the Canadians whom they swore to serve. And as vilely, they've weaponized the press against the nation's interests while forcing the citizen to assume the cost of being propagandized. We are being governed by quislings who are deserving of quisling's fate. In an article dated November the 4th, 2022 in the National Post by Terence Concorin entitled Chrystia Freeland Brings Chinese-Style Capitalism to Ottawa, missing in Ottawa's economic update is recognition of the ideological flip that is taking place. And I provide the link right in my blog to that article. Concorin wrote, "The build-up to Thursday's economic statement from Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland has been underway for some time, so it should be no surprise the Trudeau Liberal machine is promoting an expanded role for big government in the Canadian economy. What Canada needs," said Freeland in a recent speech to the Alberta Federation of Labour, "is a government with real muscular industrial policy to take on the low growth and high inflation challenges she said were created by the pandemic and Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine and a more coercive China." I've been stating this for years. That's the end of quote from that article. So I've been stating this for years. Canada is rapidly developing a totally state-run Marxist economy. If you're so damn stupid not to be terrified of this ongoing tape-down of a free economy, then here's proof COVID wasn't what you ought to have frightened you. Rather, it was what global leaders used COVID to prepare the West for, namely, a complete state-run neo-Marxist economy. In an article dated November the 3rd, 2022, also from the National Post, by Laurie Goldstein, entitled Taxpayers to Pay Billions Subsidizing Green Energy Investors, and I provide the link, Laurie wrote, "The Trudeau government is going to spend billions of taxpayer dollars subsidizing risky investments in green energy projects in order to compete for business with the United States. This was the reality, as opposed to the rhetoric contained in Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland's fall economic statement on Thursday. With Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government having already spent more than $100 billion on climate change and environmental initiatives since coming into power in 2015, the fall mini-budget announced new taxpayer-funded measures to promote green energy, plus more details of previously announced programs. Among them, first, a $15 billion Canadian growth fund, which will subsidize private sector investors financing clean energy projects by insulating them from fluctuations in carbon pricing caused by government regulations. It will also subsidize projects that are at the pilot project of development, meaning they carry an advanced risk of being able to turn a profit. Secondly, an $8 billion net zero accelerator program to subsidize private sector investment in electric vehicles and EV battery production. Thirdly, government tax credits for green energy projects costing $6.7 billion over 5 years starting in 2023, plus a separate program for the development of hydrogen technology. What's this? 4. A $3.8 billion program to implement a strategy for mining critical minerals in Canada that are necessary for producing electric vehicle batteries, as well as to facilitate the assembly of electric vehicles. 5, I believe, a $250 million expenditure over 5 years starting in 2023 to train 15,000 unionized workers for green energy jobs, plus $60 million over 3 years starting in 2023 to supplement existing federal, provincial, and territorial projects with the same aim. One of the challenges Canada faces in attracting green energy investments in competition with the U.S. is that while Canada has a national carbon tax, the U.S. does not. U.S. President Joe Biden took a no-stick, all-carrot approach to developing green energy in his Inflation Reduction Act passed by Congress in April, which is why Canada has to compete with the numerous financial incentives in the U.S. to promote clean energy. That means Biden's plan doesn't have what economic experts say is the most efficient way of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, a national carbon tax, even though, without a carbon tax, the U.S. surpassed its 2020 emission target, the same one Canada failed to meet. End of that quote. It's just so galling. Paine once asserted, "It is the duty of every man, as far as his ability extends, to detect and expose delusion and error. And the moral duty of man consists of imitating the moral goodness and beneficence of God, manifested in the creation toward all his creatures. Everything of persecution and revenge between man and everything of cruelty to animals is a violation of moral duty." With that in mind, this morning my wife had the following thoughts on the utter corruption of our current self-serving political class. "How did we get here?" she asked. "The explanation is multifaceted, but our path to ruin has gone something like this. First, the abandonment of God. Second, replacing faith and dividing order with a belief in total state control. Third, accepting immigration from cultures with whom we have little to nothing in common, thereby undermining our shared cultural social contract. 4, which results in the collectivist mindset of socialism replacing the glue of a shared heritage. And 5, a hatred of competence, individualism, and an entrepreneurial mindset." Onasiri asserted that all 5 facets are connected, with each declension leading to the undermining of the next virtue listed. The common denominator is the rejection of our own moral responsibility to God first, then to our fellows, since only then can we properly care for the natural world around us. It is only when our communities are anchored in a moral, just, and prosperous society, with each individual voluntarily assuming their responsibility to God and their fellows, that we will not constantly be fighting to keep the wolves at bay. Our elite class does not care for the planet. If they did, they would permit us to prosper sufficiently, such that we will all be stewards of the planet without worrying about how to keep warm, fed, and have a roof and keep a roof over our heads. Because that is what our ruling class is doing, impoverishing humanity so they can live in unentitled wealth. This winter, Europe is facing an abysmal energy and food shortages due to the unworkable green energy policies of globalist-minded governments who obviously have torn a page out of the same playbook. I have a gut feeling that Paine's words are even more appropriate today. 250 years ago, they were delivered at a time when society was being tyrannized by an elite class who are about to be overthrown by force. And I suspect people will soon once again say no to tyranny. What are your thoughts? I believe that's about what is about to happen. Yeah, and I won't lie, and I won't hide. I will tell the truth, and I will assume responsibility for my own words and actions. Have a wonderful Saturday afternoon. There's some thoughts to think and pray about. God bless you all.